my gosh, Jeremy, there's that stupid mountain quail you couldn't capture last episode. Why, of course they would show up now. So, is there like a best way to capture him or something, or should I just like walk straight at him? Well, glad you asked, Snipe. There's actually 5 different ways that I've discovered to be able to capture wildlife in the wild. Can you tell me more about these 5 different ways to capture wildlife in the wild? Of course I can. That's why I started a YouTube channel. Hey you guys, what's up? Welcome back to another bird photography workshop, and today I'm super excited because we are going to talk about different ways to approach wildlife in wildlife photography. So I talked about it a little bit in my 7 myths about wildlife photography episode that I had, but I want to touch on it a little bit more because it seems to me like there's kind of this stigma of that to be a wildlife photographer and to capture good photos, you have to be able to just sit down in one spot for 2 hours, 4 hours, 8 hours, a couple days, couple weeks to be able to get the photo that you're looking for. But there's also other ways to photograph wildlife. And so today we're going to talk about 5 different techniques that you can use to photograph wildlife. So the first way to photograph wildlife we're going to talk about today is blind photography. So basically what blind photography is exactly what I just said. So this is the most common way that people think of photographing birds. Maybe taking a tripod out, sitting in one area and being able to photograph things. But blind photography kind of takes it a little bit to the next step and gets you to camouflage in with your scenario. So if you have a photo blind, you're able to throw that photo blind up, or if not, you can use camo like a ghillie suit or camo nets, stuff like that to be able to set up a scene that can kind of be used as a makeshift blind for blind photography. Blind photography basically just involves sitting in one area waiting for the birds to come to you. So if you know where a bird's gonna be, this can be really helpful if you know he's gonna land on this certain perch. So for example, with kingfishers, they're kind of infamous for this, that you kind of have to wait for a kingfisher to come to you because they're so skittish, right? So what you can do is you can camp out, set up a blind near a perch that you've seen a kingfisher come to multiple times, and then being able to capture that kingfisher when he comes there without him even noticing you're there because you're camouflaged, you're in a blind or something like that. And it can also be used if you're just wanting to take a spot out in nature and just see what comes to you that day. So blind photography has a lot of really cool uses and is really an effective way to be able to capture birds nice and up close, and really is the most effective way to be able to capture birds up really close. So the second way to photograph wildlife that I'm going to talk about is called run and gun photography. So this is probably my least favorite and my least recommended in most situations, but basically what run and gun photography is just taking your camera out, walking around, seeing what you can see and just shooting the birds as you see them. It's kind of a little bit random, not quite as scouted or researched and prepared, and you're kind of just trying to find birds and just approach them kind of on the spot. So this type of photography works well if you're just a very casual, maybe bird or a very casual wildlife photographer, but to get really nice shots, this often doesn't work as well. And the reason why is because you don't have good setups when you're seeing these birds typically. The birds are much more aware of you, so they're going to jump a lot more often and things like that, so it typically doesn't make for the best wildlife portraits. I recommend doing this only if you're doing something very casually or you're kind of using this as a last resort because of some other reasons. So the third type of photography I want to talk with you guys about is what I call hybrid photography. So this is kind of combining the ideas of blind photography and run and gun photography, because one of the things that blind photography doesn't offer you is the ability to be mobile and adjust to your scenario. So for example, when you're out in maybe a big old grasslands or something like that looking for a certain type of bird, sometimes you really don't know where those birds are going to be. But when I searched for the sagebrush sparrow, I didn't know where he was going to land. They has a whole grassland to roam, and there's no specific perches there that they're used to or that they go to often, so I couldn't just set up camp somewhere. So I had to kind of use a combination of run and gun and also blind photography in the aspect of making myself camo, approaching him slowly, staying behind bushes when I can, and making him comfortable with me. And using these two techniques combined allowed me to be able to capture this sagebrush sparrow better than I could have if I just sat out in one place. It probably would have taken me days, if not weeks, to be able to see one come by me. As well as if I was just doing run and gun and just kind of walking around carelessly and just kind of whenever I see him just start shooting at him or approach him direct on, stuff like that, that wouldn't have worked as well. So it was really important for me to use both of those techniques combined. What you can kind of think of hybrid photography as is basically trying the best to camouflage and make yourself feel like you're a part of the environment without limiting yourself to one space. You might have to locate things and then adjust to the scenario, but you're not limited to one single spot like you are in blind photography. Hybrid photography is personally my favorite, my go-to for almost all the things I do. I probably use my version of hybrid photography about 75% of the time when I'm out shooting wildlife. Just giving you guys a recommendation on that. I think it's best when you can use this and combine this. Blind photography is the best when you have those situations that call for that. But in most situations I encounter, I find that this hybrid type of photography that I've kind of built works the best for me. The fourth kind of wildlife photography that you can use to capture wildlife is car photography. So this is definitely my least favorite because it doesn't feel like you're out in nature. It doesn't feel like it's some surreal experience or you're out in the wild capturing, a bird or a deer or a fox or whatever it may be. But however, it can be effective if used right. So for example, where this is most effective, and really the only time I ever really wind up using this, is with hawks, for example. Hawks or other types of raptors that maybe like to perch along fence posts along country roads or things like that. Sometimes it's most effective if you just drive slowly along the road, you're able to spot them as you go and kind of take the photos like that. Or even just when you park your car, birds are usually pretty comfortable with cars for some reason. So sometimes you can even just take your car into a parking lot, park there, and you'll find birds coming around you and you can maybe photograph from inside your car. And birds don't seem to be as leery of that for some reason. Car photography definitely can be useful, but is not necessarily my favorite because of the whole fact of not really feeling like you're out in nature, and therefore I don't do it often, maybe once or twice a year. Now, the last type of photography I want to talk to you guys about today is creative photography. So sometimes your photography doesn't fit into any of these boxes, and this is what that fifth category is for. But what I most kind of wind up using this with is with like remote shutters, things like that, or if I'm trying to get a wide angle. With creative photography, these are really all the other scenarios that you would bump into, so it's not an exact scenario. But for example, using a remote shutter, so maybe camping out somewhere further away, using a wide angle that's set up on the ground where you know a bird's about to feed, like maybe a sparrow's coming down to the ground for seeds there, or maybe there's a nest in a tree cavity and you're deciding that you want to get maybe the starling popping out of the cavity like I got in my Lost Lake video. So in situations like that, creative photography, there's a lot of other things that could happen and there's a lot of other situations to be prepared for. So don't limit yourself just to the previous 4 types of photography that I listed, but also keep an open mind, see if there's any other ways that you can think of to capture birds, and sometimes those scenarios might call for it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe below. I hope these 5 different ways to photograph wildlife help you guys in your adventures and your experiences with photographing wildlife. I hope they're able to be applied to your wildlife photography and that you can get something useful out of it. Maybe try something new you've never tried before, or maybe just grow in what you're already doing. But either way, I hope it helped you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching this bird photography workshop, and I can't wait to see you guys next week.